Okay. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for joining. We are very happy to meet all together for this event. We have tried to organize this event not online in Italy, but the pandemic has stopped us due to the beginning of the lockdown in Italy. And I hope you and your family are safe. I would like to thank both John and Carlo for their availability also in February and today. And I also would like to say thanks to Elfo, our sponsor, because it gives us the possibility to organize an event like this. It is the first time we organize an online event, but we did our best, and we hope it will a good experience. Starting right now, John will show the updates of Vuetify 2, and after 50 minutes, we will have the speech also from Carlo, who will show an experience of a full stack migration, how this migration was managed thanks to the .NET Core and the Vuetify JS frameworks. And I think starting from in an hour and a half, we will have 10 minutes to a quarter of a Q&A session with the speakers. So enjoy, and thank you again, Carlo, John.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to see. Okay, now I can see it. Show my screen. Let's see. Is it showing my entire screen, or let's see if I can select one. Here we go. Found it. Okay. Can you see the presentation right now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Great. All right. So, well, again, thank you for having me. Unfortunately, we didn't get to make it there in February. We were in Amsterdam, and Elfo communicated to us very early on about the situation, and we were able to make a decision to come home early and didn't get stuck overseas. So that was very fortunate, and we thank them for communicating with us. But now that we're back, so I'm in Austin, Texas right now. This is my office, and so I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about what we have done with Vuetify over the course of version 2, leading up to it and throughout, what we're kind of working on in the future, and if we have enough time, which I think we should be okay, a little live demo kind of showing you some of the CLI tooling that I've been working on. So if you don't know who I am, my name is John Leader. I'm the author of Vuetify. I've been working with Vuetify since June of 2016 is when I initially started working on it. And in October of 2017 is actually when I was able to quit my job and work on open source full time. And I have been working full time on it ever since. I run it with my wife, Heather. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So if you don't know what Vuetify is, so we are a UI library that takes the design specifications from Google for their material design, and using the Vue.js framework, translate that into a set of reusable components. And what the component allows you to do is have a clean interface for developing your web application. And the best way I usually describe to people is if Vue.js were the blueprints or the foundation for a house, then Vuetify would be the decor, the paint on the walls, the decoration. So one of the big things that we've been working on leading up to version 2 is our accessibility. And in order to do that, we had to utilize one of the newer, well, not newer features, but somewhat newer features in Vue for 2.6, which were scope slots. And the reason why we had to do that was the items that exist as activators, whether it be for a menu or for a select, they have different attributes that are required for accessibility based upon what they are. And because we offer the flexibility of the user to essentially use anything that they want to initiate these events. In this case, we're using a button, which would be standard, but a user could technically use a span or a div. We want them to be able to not only still have the flexibility to control how things look, but also to still receive the benefits of accessibility. So what we're able to do here now is, in the components, we actually calculate and determine what those attributes should be, and then we pass them through the slot. So in this particular instance, we have a menu component with a button, and now that button has attributes passed to it, which whenever it actually renders in the DOM, now you have the area attributes for accessibility already rendered onto the component without you having to worry about it. So, and with anything, you know, accessibility is something we're always working on. We have made massive improvements for our version 2.0, and along the way, we actually ran into obviously many accessibility-driven developers, but one in particular, Fighter, who has a actual business need for it at his job, and has joined the team as kind of our head guy for accessibility. So we've actually had a dedicated developer that's been focused on accessibility. And then recently we also brought on some additional core team members, Johanna and Vanessa from that we had met at various conferences, and they're part of the Vixens organization. And they're also helped focusing on accessibility, but also beginner guides and whatnot. So trying to provide a better experience for users that is outside of the traditional HTML elements, because if you have a select, it's automatically by browser just going to have the correct accessibility. Most frameworks that create custom elements outside of the standard HTML ones don't properly support accessibility, and that's one thing we're trying to fix. Well, not trying to, that we were able to fix. We also improved our internationalization.
Sorry, John. Sorry. There is the possibility to zoom a little bit on the slides, because
okay, hold on one second. Let me see if I can make this.
Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no, it's not a problem at all. I have an interesting setup at home, and I have a widescreen, ultra wide, and a side monitor. So if you just give me one moment as I try to resolve that. Okay. And then I'll need to change this. Sharing. I think that's it. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I'll take a second for some water. So another thing that we have expanded upon, and this is something that we have always we have supported for a very long time, accessibility within our components. We have an internal translator functionality that essentially we have various languages that the framework supports out of the box, and that those language translations go into the components. So at the root level, when you instantiate the Vuetify application, you can define what languages are available and what your current one is. And whenever you change it, it on real time will automatically update all of your components. So if you have, for example, if you've ever been in the Vuetify documentation, whenever you click down on the languages button and you select another language or locale, we just modify what the current language is on the Vuetify language instance, and then everything automatically updates. And then we also work with, Vue i18n to be able to integrate with them. And it allows us to provide the user a baseline entry for creating and translating different languages for the Vuetify components, but also the flexibility to integrate with more robust applications and feature sets. RTL, or bidirectionality, again, something that we have always supported, but over the course of version 2 development, we had made it a goal to 100% have everything configured for RTL, which I'm very happy to say we were able to do. Obviously, as with anything, there's room for improvement, and we have a lot of developers that have helped us fine-tune and tweak some of the various aspects of files over the course of the 2.0 development and maintenance cycle. But right now, what it allows us to do is real time, the user can actually, or the developer can allow the user to change the orientation of the screen, and all of the components for Vuetify will automatically adjust to compensate. So all their margins and anything that is that differentiates whenever you change the document orientation from to right to left, we take care of that for you. It's toggleable, and we even have custom classes that you can hook into that are assigned on the that are assigned per component. And that's actually another interesting thing that you can do is you can modify the RTL status on a per component basis and be able to hook into it and do some extra customization if necessary. One of the things that we have always been pretty decent at, but that I wanted to have a solidified path going forward, was our release cadence. I felt that it was really important for users, businesses, or anybody that they felt confident the software they were using was being properly maintained on a consistent basis, and that they were able to feel confident in knowing that every single week they're going to have bug fixes. Every single quarter they're going to have new minors, and we're always progressing for the next major version, which obviously in this case is version 3. And so since past 18 months, I believe, we have averaged over 1 release a week, but guaranteed always have 1 release every single Tuesday, which has been really good. And I appreciate all the help the team has given and the community for allowing us to continue such a consistent release cycle, which we have such an amazing group of individuals and such a massively growing community and repository. We have so many contributors that are helping with the framework to disposition issues and help with releases and to create new features and functionality and help fix bugs and to coordinate with users in the community to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to keep people informed and helped. And because of that, I believe that's why we are now the #1 downloaded Vue framework besides Vue and in the ecosystem, and we were able to cross 1 million downloads a month, which I am very proud of, and I think that it's been an amazing experience to be able to grow with such a thoughtful and welcoming community, which has been a lot of fun. And in order to help facilitate that, which is something that I have been from the beginning, is helping the community. So whenever I started development, anytime that I ran into a situation that I couldn't explain or understand, I would try to reach out for help. And for the most part, if you're dealing with anything open source or essentially almost any software that you're not paying for, you kind of are at the whim of whatever process, if any, exists to receive or to get some sort of help. Usually that involves a Google search and going on Stack Overflow or hoping that someone else has encountered the same problem as you. But what if that fails? And what if you have something more than just a side project that you want to make sure that when you choose a piece of software that if the need arises, you have the ability to get support for that product. Now, we do have a Discord community. Originally, when we started out, it was Gitter, I believe is the correct way to pronounce it. And that was kind of the entryway into creating a spot where people could come and discuss Vuetify, and at least at that point in time when it was just me, my brand new piece of software, so that I could help them to resolve issues. And when we found bugs, it allowed me to address them really quickly. Now, eventually we transferred over to Discord because they had a feature set that provided us the ability to better manage a community, to provide benefits and perks for people that help support the framework, and then to also, first and foremost, provide the ability for users to come in and not only get help, but if they have time or the ability to or want to, for them to be able to help other people. The second line of not necessarily support, but getting help, is being able to have a process for not only reporting bugs and requesting features, which most larger repositories will have, but also in our particular instance, same thing as Vue, we have an abstracted issues application that essentially makes sure that we have all of the information that we need in order to triage or disposition an issue effectively. And then all the user is essentially doing is filling out a form. So this process allows the issues, I mean, I guess for better or worse, it makes it easier for people to submit issues. So we have a much larger issue board than most. But when you actually break that down into bugs, bugs make up less than, I think it's 45% of our total issues right now. Most are feature requests. A lot of them are documentation updates, and quite a few are either duplicated or already resolved. So users, again, are able to go and search for existing issues on GitHub and be able to try to find help and resources for some questions that had already been answered or maybe resolved, and it maybe is a version update that needed to have, or there was a change that affects how they were maybe using a piece of functionality that they needed to accommodate for. So the next setup is, or the next level of support is TideLift. So and TideLift is a enterprise level, or excuse me, they are the bridge between a smaller open source maintainer like myself and an enterprise company that is, has a much different process for not only supporting or getting support from a particular entity. They also are probably not gonna just create a GitHub account and just to start sponsoring a guy. So what TideLift is they are a bridge between that allows me to be able to work and assist larger entities and organizations through a platform where essentially they pay me to continue doing what I'm already doing, which is absolutely amazing. And then the last beacon or tier, if you've got nothing left, right? And I didn't get to change the logo. We actually have expanded our calendar system to include just more than me for consulting, and we're trying to bring on more core developers. But you can go into the documentation right now, and if you need to, you can schedule time with myself or a core developer member to get help with your project, to get help with advice on structure and building components and best practices and procedures. And then all of these things exist in an ecosystem to provide kind of a security net for developers and their businesses, to where they say, okay, I've got the ability to have free support. I have the ability to get support on GitHub, which I didn't even mention. I guess one of the things I just forgot to mention was not only do you have the ability to create issues and feature requests on GitHub, but recently, within the last, I think, 6 to 8 months, maybe a little bit longer, I don't know, I'm kind of confused on time, but GitHub opened up a new process called GitHub Sponsors. And originally I was on Patreon, where there were benefits that users could have for supporting me, and then we also had benefits for that were more expensive that were aimed towards businesses. And one of the goals that I was trying to do in bridging that gap between free support and enterprise support, and then the consulting is kind of a little bit separate, but something specific that where a business could support the project, but also receive benefits at the same time, as far as consulting or project auditing or chat support or whatever the case may be. So there's a middle tier for higher level users or small businesses, medium businesses that want to be able to get support as far as if they have questions, where they can reach out to a core developer or myself whenever they want. They can get their issues resolved on GitHub first, or their feature requests prioritized, things that kind of matter to help that. And then we end up with this ecosystem of support where the user has a way to get help in what I would consider less than traditional methods, as opposed to just having to search on Google and hoping that your search term matches the same issue that someone else has had. So for version 2 improvements, the goal was to build a better framework, always, right? That's what we always hear. But we really wanted to kind of touch up some of the things that were really difficult about version 1.5 when it came to performance, when it came to process and procedure, organization, and obviously moving away from JavaScript and all the way into TypeScript. So again, some of the big updates and changes leading up to and post, we discussed, accessibility, WCAG, and Section 508 support. Section 508 is for United States veterans disability. RTL support we discussed, and then as I started to come into TypeScript, we moved everything over to TypeScript, and we originally were on Stylus, and we liked it. I like it. I think it's great. The biggest issue that we were running into, though, was the project was not updated at almost at all, and most of the community was comfortable or somewhat familiar with Sass already. So moving over was not only a pretty easy and painless process, but it also allowed us to open up new ways for users to contribute to the project, because that's obviously the goal of open source, is to get more contributions. We had massive performance improvements for inputs. Kale and the other core members and contributors were able to figure out a way to work around a reactivity caveat in Vue 2 that, I think if resolved on their end, would cause breaking changes for other users. But on our end, we were able to come up with a process for mitigating that particular reactivity caveat and massively improve our input performance. So if you were a user that is on 1.5 or less and utilized a lot of form components and were having some difficulties with performance with larger subsets, great improvements for that. We improved the style variables in the customization process, where it's much easier to modify the default underlying styles of Vuetify in multiple different ways to kind of help streamline your process for developing and creating apps. And I will talk about that in a little bit later. Tons of new components, calendar, fully completely dependency-free calendar, new improvements for date picker for being able to select ranges, brand new, completely updated data table with massive improvements for customization, and just so many more things, and also some additional directives using some of the new APIs in JavaScript, the ones that are polyfill capable. For example, the mutation observer and the intersection observer, put into directives to provide you with, again, an easy interface to utilize some typically more advanced functionality. So some of the new and improved components we have, and you'll see this if you're going through our documentation, skeleton loaders. We have a file input component, which is a traditional text input, or excuse me, a traditional file input replacement. We do have a regular file upload, which is a more interface-driven upload process, still in the works, so no worries about that. Utilizing the new intersection observer functionality, we're able to, and if you don't know what the intersection observer API or functionality is, in a nutshell, it's a way of determining if an element is visible to the user or not. So if you've ever went on a website where as you scroll down, content dynamically renders in, intersection observer helps make that a very easy process. And we were able to take that directive and then apply it into a component that we call the lazy component, which gives you the ability to define box sizes so that your content has, for example, if you have a picture that's always going to be 300 pixels in height, you can designate that for the lazy component so that you have the proper spacing. And then when the user gets within a specific distance, it'll automatically load your content. So you avoid having to render content below the folder that you cannot see for the user, drastically improving the performance for your application. New banner component, which is part of the MD2, Material Design 2 specification. A new color picker, which I got to work with, primarily Albert, which was a lot of fun. Very expansive component with lots of features and capabilities. And the whole idea is to give you more options. It's very difficult to get everyone something that they want. So the goal for us has always been to let's start with a baseline level and have a set of tools that we compositionally, even though we use an extend architecture for TypeScript support in version 2, compositionally provide the ability for developers to easily take our tools and make their own implementations if they want. So we have a carousel component, and you can use that, but maybe you don't like it, and that's okay. You can just take a item group and a window component and make your own carousel. You have all the tools available to you. So at the end of the day, you have the ability to not only take what we have and use it as it is, or customize it, or use the tools we took to build it to make your own. We improved styling dramatically with Sass, and including improvements to our CLI plugin, our Vue CLI plugin. And what we were able to do was, oh no, I think the vacuum turned on. Sorry if it gets too loud, I apologize, but all the kids are at home. So what we were able to do though, our CLI plugin is utilizing the architecture provided by Vue CLI. We're able to hook in to their build process for custom for Sass variables and find your custom variables file as designated. Hold on, let me go turn this off real quick. It's gonna mess with things. Give me 1 second. Of all the places, it comes up right by the door. Okay, I apologize for that. Thank you. So what we wanted to do was provide an easy way for users to be able to modify our Sass variables, which you could already do, but was arguably a very involved process. So now you can just create a variables file in Sass or SCSS folder or styles folder, or variables Sass or variables SCSS, and redefine the variables that we have for our components and core features and functionality. Because whenever you use Vuetify, we're going to take the components, and we actually, if you'll notice if you have already have an application, you may have seen your vue.config.js file has an option that says transpile dependencies for Vuetify. And the reason why we do that is, and what that essentially does, we compile the style files in real time whenever you're doing development. This gives us a couple benefits. Obviously, you can do in development Sass variables changes, make changes, and then have your application be able to update in real time for you, as opposed to maybe building these the Sass output into a file and then having to restart your dev process. So again, we already had a way to do it, but the process wasn't well defined. So what we wanted to do is make it easy to opt in and out at any time. If you want to use variables, that's great, and you can. And if you don't, then you can just remove the file, or essentially opt out of the functionality at any point in time by removing the ability for the CLI plugin to access those variables. We added thousands of new variables, especially with version 2.2, and I'll talk about that a little bit, to make it easier to, again, customize the framework. There is obviously certain areas that don't have customization options. For example, maybe a display block or inline or something like that for an element or a component. It doesn't make sense to default have a variable. People ask for it, we add it, but still plenty of options available, but it does increase compilation time. We have been working on, there is a way to be able to decrease that time a little bit by changing how you import, and we have these things defined on the docs, but it gives you the ability to have more flexibility and customization for your application. Again, real quickly on TypeScript, we already had most of our framework in TypeScript before we were doing a progressive update, but we wanted to then, again, move over everything finally so that we can have a unified development process for version 2. Created, more typings available for users that are utilizing that particular functionality, and again, refined our process for sharing functionality with mixins and receiving the benefits of TypeScript through extending the Vue object. Again, some quality of life changes. I briefly discussed the Be Lazy component. Well, this is essentially how it operates and how you can even use the functionality for yourself. So for example, the v-intersect directive is a easy way to access the intersection observer API. And you can tell it, just like with any one of our other directives, whenever the scenario happens that invokes this function, go ahead and perform this action, which in this particular instance is our onIntersect. What that allows us to do is add some interesting functionality out of the box. For example, vImage is automatically by default defer load. So it's only going to load whenever it's going to be visible to the user, with automatic fallback available for either if a polyfill isn't detected or the particular browser doesn't support that functionality, and then the image will just load. What that does is it opens up the ability for us to not only create new components, but to provide powerful tools for users to be able to develop and create, their applications as easily as possible. And it also has given us the ability to fix some issues in regards to what we call detachables. And in a nutshell, a detachable is anything for us that detaches to the root of the DOM to be positioned. That could be a dialog, a menu, a tooltip. But one of the things that was in 1.1 that was an issue was those elements or those components always rendered their content before it detached it to the DOM. And this obviously caused a performance decrease and caused issues that made it difficult for large applications. For example, if you had a data table with lots of menus and you start up your application and all of those menus are rendering their content, it's not very efficient. So now all of those are lazy by default due to that functionality, being able to detect whenever they're needed, but also for components that exist inside of them, being able to detect their updates. And an example would be if you've ever worked with a tabs component or any component in anything that requires size or dimensions to be able to determine its functionality, whenever it's not visible in the document and it goes to retrieve that information, those values are always 0. So if you were using a Vuetify component, for example, a auto-focused text field when you opened up the dialog, after the first time, it doesn't work anymore. But now with features like Intersect, we can add in changes that will say, hey, whenever this is viewed, you can go ahead and refresh yourself or recalculate your init cycle. And what this allows us in the end to do is provide better SEO with performance-centric features that are built out of the box for good SEO, smaller bundle sizes because the features that we're providing are all tree shakeable with our loader, which happens automatically with the Vue CLI plugin. You don't even have to do anything. And it provides, at the end of the day, improved performance. So if you have a lot of these features and functionalities for dialogues and menus and tooltips utilized in version 1.5, 2 is going to be an amazing improvement for your performance. First thing that we introduced with the release of version 2.0 was our long-term support plan. The long-term support plan was designed to, again, provide users the comfort to know that their application is going to be continually updated and major security bugs and vulnerabilities are addressed. We have, for our first entry level into long-term support, we did 12 months. So version 1.5 has support for 2 more months, which hopefully in 2 more months we'll have version 3 out, and I'll talk about that. But from now on, so when version 3 comes out, we will, after it's released, we will do 1 more iteration on version 2.3, which we'll be doing a 2.3. We'll do 1 more iteration on that, bring it up to 2.4, and that will be the long-term support for Miner. And that will be the start of 18 months. So when version 3 comes out, and then we iterate version 2.4, 18 months after that, version 2.4 will be supported for security vulnerabilities and critical bugs, and also general maintenance where applicable. We also have very extensive upgrade guides and migration help channels to kind of ease this process. We traditionally work with a few larger businesses during this process to ensure it is as smooth as possible. Earlier on in the framework, we did have a couple road bumps that caused users some issues with upgrading. We have since refined that process and put it as a #1 goal. And even if we're upgrading to a major, to mitigate as many breaking changes as possible while still being able to achieve the goal of implementing the new features and functionality that are in line with our new goals for the next version. And again, we just want to give you peace of mind so that whenever you choose to use Vuetify, that whether you like it or not, that if you're using it, you have the ability to access these particular features. Now I'm going to go into the ecosystem development, which is something that Vue 2 started in its life cycle after its version 2 release. And I believe with Vuetify, where our position at, we are finally solid enough to be able to create tooling around the ecosystem that we're not going to have to rapidly change every release, because we're still trying to get a solid baseline down. And same goal as Vue CLI. We want to make it easier for users to be able to develop using Vue and Vuetify. So we have an ecosystem of plugins that are, some of these are already out and some of these are currently in development, that are designed to, again, augment and improve your development process. Our Vuetify loader, which provides automatic tree shaking for components and styles and directives. It's automatically integrated into the Vue CLI, the Vuetify Vue CLI plugin, and it's also just a Webpack plugin, so you can hook it up in your regular Webpack installation as well. Our regular CLI plugin, as I just discussed, this is kind of the entryway to utilizing Vuetify, and our direct plugin for the Vue CLI ecosystem. Some new things that are in the works, particularly the Storybook, the Vuetify CLI, and we have what I'll talk about in just a moment, the theme presets. We also have ESLint config and ESLint plugin, which are, again, to not only help provide a good baseline for your linter, but also for our upgrade process. Our ESLint plugin, if you come from version 1.5 to 2.0, majority of our users are automated upgrade system for the new grid, and a lot of the features that are in the framework just happens automatically. And again, this is one of those things that makes it easier for you to not only use Vuetify in your projects, but to upgrade it along the way. And again, we're always trying to look and improve how we our process. And so far, I think that we're on a good path, and we'll continue to refine it. But I think that it's been going pretty well right now for the upgrade process since version 2. And yeah, that's our goal continuing forward. So the better tooling is going to come with the what I call the Vue CLI presets. It is a relatively small feature of Vue CLI, but I'd argue a very powerful one. And essentially what it allows developers to do is define an entire structure of the features that are to be installed with a new Vue CLI project. So if you've ever done Vue create my project, that's what is output, and you select your options. Well, this is selecting all the options automatically for you based upon what we believe is a good system to utilize. Having things like Storybook integration, which means whenever you are developing with Vuetify, that you can easily storybook those components within your application. Being able to take theme presets, which are maybe slightly confusing because it's called presets as well, but is it focused on the theme part of Vuetify, utilizing the new material studies, which is a new set of content pages on the material design specification website that shows how you can take the material design concepts, components, colors, styles, and make them look nothing like material, but still provide the exact same features and functionality that you would expect with Vuetify. And again, we wanted to create a structure that promotes best practices and procedures. When you create a new Vue app, that new Vue app has a specific structure, and you are confident to know that that's a good structure because the creators made it. That's what we're trying to do right here. Slightly tap on a couple things that are little tweaks from the Vue style guide and our experience, and then the rest, again, just a regular default Vue application. Things with the Vuetify loader, automatically we can set up progressive image loading. So if you've ever a good website, I guess would be Medium, where you come to the site, it's got kind of a blurred picture and that picture fades in. This is automatically capable with our Vuetify loader right out of the box. It just happens for you whenever you build your project. And then again, our tree shaking. The right example over here is obviously somewhat contrived. It's a representation of a large majority of our users, where they they only pick out a few particular features that they need from the framework, and the rest they don't touch. So again, with our automatic tree shaking, you don't have to worry about that in the final bundle. And most of our users see up to a 60% reduction in their bundle sizes. As soon as they, if they've already been in the framework, it happens automatically, but when they upgrade to the Vuetify loader, they're able to see these massive improvements. With the Vue CLI presets, so we had the Vue CLI plugin, or Vuetify CLI plugin, but now we're going to have a set of 3 Vue CLI presets, and these are essentially pre-built or pre-structured applications that utilize the features that already exist in Vue CLI to scaffold together a complete and ready to go project for you. So right now the base is the only one that's being worked on, and essentially what it does is it creates you a basic application that uses Vuetify CLI plugin, ESLint config plugin, unit tests, and it is a kind of baseline application for you to get started with. It has everything already configured for routes and a good default structure. It is opinionated, but it's designed to be so. The next set, though, when we move to when I develop the essential preset and further on, we'll have another tier of features. For example, it'll include the Vuetify CLI, which is a scaffolding application for being able to quickly scaffold Vue component files with a default structure to, again, make the process faster and easier. And then when we move on to things like the recommended presets, we start to, again, bring in additional features and functionality that we believe is important for users that are going to be developing complex and expansive applications. And then what we're able to do with that is say, when Vuetify CLI is creating a component, we can say, hey, does the user have unit tests? Okay, they have unit tests, generate a boilerplate unit test for this component. Does the user have the storybook plugin? If it does, go ahead and generate a boilerplate storybook for this particular component. And what this ends up doing is removing the necessity to fight and argue to have time to write unit tests or to create a storybook plugin or to have additional functionality that not only helps you, but helps the stakeholders for your projects understand better what is in those projects and how they work. We're able to reduce the cognitive load for the user, build better applications. The plugins, like I said, have interoperability between themselves due to or because of the feature set from Vue CLI. And then again, automated unit tests and storage generation, trying to take something that we do all the time and make it a little bit easier and make it a little bit faster. So I'm going to try to talk about version 3 for a moment. I didn't have slides for version 2.3. You can get in our community afterwards and talk to me if you have some questions about that. community.vuetifyjs.com. We will have a 2.3 that'll be going into beta here very shortly that has, basically it's just a feature, minor feature that has tons of new things that we're bringing to the users to kind of fill some gaps in the framework until we're able to get version 3 out, which is what we're working on right now. So the version 3.0 updates, well, we had some focuses and goals that we wanted to achieve with it. And again, you can follow on, if you look on the bottom right of the slide, notion.vuetifyjs.com. This is a public Notion board in which we have everything that we're doing for version 3 down to the coding guidelines specified. And you can look at those, provide feedback, and just see where we're at as far as our progress on version 3. But we wanted to rebuild it with the composition API. We knew this because it was a powerful feature that improved our TypeScript support. It was very similar to how we already composed our components. We used render functions and mixins, which are being removed, I think, because of us. And so we already had this general process that was very similar to the composition API. So we knew, hey, we just want to move over to this. It's going to be a better process. We wanted to replace mixins with a new concept called effects. And this has to do with the, instead of having mixins that obscure functionality, they're going to be explicitly imported functions, pure functions, that provide reactive objects that allow us to do the same things we did before, but know where the features are coming from. Understanding that, hey, this mixin that I put in here has this computed property that I don't know exists. because I can't see it. Whereas when we utilize effects, and I'll show you this in just a moment, it is more apparent what's going on. We wanted to improve the component structure, kind of have a definition for how things were to be developed so that we didn't have to think about it again. And obviously, at the end of the day, we're always trying to improve our development process. The more efficient it is, the better and more efficiently, or the faster we can get releases out and reduce the amount of issues that we have. So the reduced complexity, looking on the right side, this is a version, let's see, this is version 3, I think, right there. Yeah, so this is the composition API for Vue, and this is an example of what our V-app component would now look like, as opposed to having computed properties that exist on the object and having a render function. Instead, we utilize just the regular setup process that is provided in version 3 and utilize the built-in, or excuse me, the abstracted reactivity system in Vue to only bring in what we need. So we only need a computed property, that's it. We don't have all the other features and functionalities that come with a standard Vue 2 component. Instead, we are only bringing in what we need. We wanted to identify the primary role of features and be able to say, hey, this component is scoped to this features and functionality. It doesn't do too many things. It has a real defined role. Take the duplicate functionality that is shared between multiple components, which we already do generally with mix-ins, but do it better and get it out into an abstracted state where we can not only unit test it, but utilize its functionality in multiple places without having it so proprietarily tied into a specific component. We wanted to be able to improve the contributor experience. Being able to define everything that we're doing for version 3 means that users can read it, research it, and not have to ask as many questions because those questions have generally already been answered. And then at the end of the day, making it easier to maintain. Everything is about reducing the amount of time it takes to do things, not only for you as a developer, but for us as maintainers. So I know that I'm kind of running on time here and I have a couple slides left. I'll try to move through them as efficiently as possible, but to best convey some more version 3 things that we're going to do. So some of the big benefits that we had with our version 1 and 2 process was the mix-ins allowed us to take duplicate code and make it easier to not only test that, but provide functionality to all the components, what we want to do with effects or what we're going to do with effects. But the problem is that it obfuscates where that functionality comes from. You do have a chance of name collisions with either data variables or with computer properties, and due to Vue's merging strategies, these will be overwritten. It's hard to tell that, and it can be confusing for contributors to follow the chain of how functionality gets into a component. So again, it makes the code hard to reason about. So talking about effects, so looking at the top one, this is an example of a current mix-in. Has a computer property for elevation classes, and all it does in a nutshell is take some user provided input and creates a specific class definition for it that it references something already in the framework to provide a class object that we combined for the components. This would normally come in a mix-in that would be imported and then provided to Vue. Whereas now, instead, we're going to be exporting functions. And this particular case, the concept is use the elevation classes, take in the properties that are provided by the user, and return the specific output. It gives us a what's called pure function approach. It's easy, way easier to type, and then it also, again, lets us see where the features are coming from. We all, with that process, we're able to, there are concepts of refs and reactive, where we can make variables not only reactive, but they'll contain a value property, which further makes it clear what something is. If it has a .value property, we know it's reactive. If it doesn't, we know it's not reactive. And these processes and procedures are outlined in our coding guidelines, which is on the notion.vuetify.js.com. So when is release? Well, we're targeting Q2, Q3. Obviously, with the current state of the globe, that is, we are still progressing forward, but a lot of the team is understandably so, working on as much as they can, but they have to take care of their life, and we understand that. So we are working very hard to get that out quarter 2, quarter 3, and we'll continue to provide updates and on the Notion website or Notion board, and you can also come into our community to ask questions. Originally, the goal was to release immediately whenever Vue 3 launches, but with the state of things, we are a much larger project to maintain, and it takes a lot more work to get everything ready to go. But rest assured, we'll have some alphas out very shortly so that you can start playing with some of the new processes. And that's pretty much it. That's Vuetify in depth. I do have a small demo, but I could potentially do that later after after the next talker goes on. But that was Vuetify. Again, my name is John Leader. You can follow me at ZeroSkills on Twitter. Also, there's at VuetifyJS Twitter. And yeah, thank you very much for having me. That's Vuetify in depth.
Thank you, John. Yeah, if possible, we would like to keep the demo and the Q&A at the end. There should be an end closer to the, I think, sharing panel. I don't know if all attendees can see the panel that is called sharing on the webcam. So there is an end in a draw of a hand. You can raise your hand for the questions, guys. And in case, we can also try to provide you the possibility to ask directly with the voice. That's it. Okay, thank you again. Carlo, could you prepare to start sharing? And okay. Andrea, could you please make him presenter?
He's already. Okay, so Carlo now is a speaker.
Okay. No? Can't you share?
Oh, it says I gave him the presenter, but I don't know how to do anything else besides that.
Carlo, you just have to unmute your mic now, I think. Okay, and the speaker role is
okay. Now yes. Now yes.
You.
Now yes.
Okay. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can see and we can hear you too.
Can you see also my slide from automating to making a template? Okay. Okay. Sorry guys, but okay, in this way. Okay, so nice to meet you. This is my speech about a tale that happened in my company about a company framework changing, and I want to put this title to my presentation, which it's obscure probably for a lot of people that is attending this speech, which is from automating to making a template, but we will see what is the reason of this title. First of all, for people that doesn't know me, I'm Carlo Fedeli. I'm the Vice CTO at LFSRL, and here, if you want, there are some contact if you want to make me some question and speak to me about technology in general. I'm working in LFSRL. Elfo is a medium big software house that has distributed in 3 zones around the world. We have the headquarters in Fiorenzuola near Milan, and then we have another plant near Milan, and then another plant in Kiev. We are in the market since 1988, so a lot of time in the market. And as you can see, we are in a lot of developer. We are mostly 90 developer. And we have a lot of customer around the world. A lot of customer also are important ones. We are speaking about multinational. I can see that we are. I can say that we are pretty big as a software house, and I want to highlight what happens from a technician point of view in this software house with a schema, with this kind of schema. I use this kind of schema, which is called IDEF0. It's a kind of representation of problem, very used in the pharmaceutical structure. And here, I think we can have is simply represented the reality in a software house, because what we are doing in the day by day is satisfy customer requirements that are the input, and elaborate these customer requirements, the input of our black box called software production, with some controls and mechanisms. Controls are in red, mechanisms are in purple. Controls are project management, people management, and external noise. And then we have the mechanism. The mechanisms are the developer, which we are, the development framework that we are using the day by day, and the operation framework that we are using to deploy our software. The mix of all of these aspects gives the output, which are the deploys, the software, what we did, and of course also the bugs, because we can be liar and say that we can produce bugs. The result of the mix of all of these ingredients, of course, wants to achieve the goal of having a beautiful deployed software with 0 bugs. But of course, if you put some wrong ingredients in this recipe, the result can be unwanted. I mean, you can have a lot of bugs instead of good product quality. In a company like Elfo, that has a great experience and is present from since a long time in the market, as all other software houses over the world, we are stressing a lot the project management, the people management, the phase of hiring of developer. And what I see is that the natural things that happens in a company like us is that the development framework are not considered, yes, are important, but are not considered important in terms of I want to keep updating day after day, day after day. The trend of a company like us is to have legacy code. I mean, I want to stress much more the control of our developer, of our all the organization aspect, and if a code works, don't touch it, because it works. And it's reasonable as a concept, this one, because in terms of costs, we don't want to save the world, we want to make money. So in terms of cost management, it's reasonable as a trend. What is the problem? The problem is that if you look at what happens in Elfo, we are, I forgot to say that we are Microsoft Gold partner, so we are very close to Microsoft technology stack. So we are following during the years the Microsoft technology stack and its evolution. If you look at this graph, you can see that in blue you have the important release of Microsoft, in orange the important release of Elfo framework. I mean, we start with ASP with Microsoft in 1996. Then Elfo produced the first framework development framework for the company in 2001. Then Microsoft released Web Form in 2002, and Elfo produced a developer framework tool in 2006. Then Elfo stay with this framework until 2018, I think. So, but during these 20 years, 15 years, Microsoft released a lot of technology, but not only Microsoft. The world changed. I mean, there will be the introduction of a lot of framework in JavaScript. There will be the introduction of single page application. The world, not only Microsoft, the world of IT change. And so using I think that what we saw is that don't put attention, the needed attention on developer framework, give you some risks. First of all, a risk in terms of firing, because we are, I think that most of that in this talk is working in a software house, and you already know the importance of hiring and the importance of in a company like us. Every day we are searching for a new developer, and it's hard to find a new developer. So yeah, hiring is important, but hiring now a person that know technology like a SPAT web form, which is a technology of 20 years ago, is not appealing in terms of receiving CV, and also because the school education is different from 20 years ago. Now, people that attend the school, college, university has a different knowledge built in of IT. Another problem, another risk is on the market, because our competitor can offer much more solutions that are more advanced in terms of technology. And also another risk is customer, because customer understand that okay, your web application, for example, made with a stack of 20 years ago, has some limits that are not related to bug of the developer, but that are related to the technology on which they are built. And so what we said, I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, is it was okay, we have to change our technology stack. If you are in the same situation, if you are working in a software house, and if you feel the same risks, I think that it's time to change your tech stack. And okay, it's easy to say change tech stack, but what does it mean? I can give you the example of what happened in Elfo. In Elfo, we had a toolset. Okay, see the toolset as a sort of classes, helper of classes that help the Elfo developer in the day by day. Okay, built on top of a SPAT web form. On top of a SPAT web form, and on top of Elfo toolset, we produce web application, REST service, web service. Okay. This kind of technology stack is related to a Microsoft stack of was related to a Microsoft stack of 2002, where the server-side development was in C# and the SPAT web form. Where the client-side development, the web application, was in pure jQuery, and the bandwidth between server and client, with client I mean the Chrome browser that is executing your website, the bandwidth is used for both exchange data and UI, because through using this stack, the requests are not only for data to the server, but also are for, okay, give me the HTML. Then the HTML arrive through some selector of jQuery. You have to redefine then the HTML that the server gives you. So a lot of time, this means a lot of time during the pipeline. We are putting a lot of latency in the requests that are not all related to data, but a lot of are related to the displaying something in the UI. We move to this kind of architecture. So server side, we split completely server from the client. At server side, we say, okay, we put a SPAT core, we have our Elfo toolset, our helper, our bunch of classes that helps developer in the day by day, and then we produce REST service. At the client side, we take Vue.js as a base engine. We put Vuetify on top of it for the UI part. I mean, Vue is the core engine of the framework that we are using for creating single page application. On top of it, we put Vuetify for having UI control. Vuetify is the framework, of course, that John was speaking about, but it's also the subject of this meeting. Then we put on top of Vuetify some classes, some helper, and then we create single page application. In this way, by design, just only because we change stack without doing nothing else, we reduce the load time of our application, because now the bandwidth, the latency, so between the bandwidth and the latency due to the calls between client and server are just for getting data. All the UI loading part, so the rendering part of the page, is just client side. We also introduce in this way scalability improvement, because now natively we don't have the problem of state, the problem of session that we had with ASP.NET Web Form, because now we move server side in a pure REST stateful stateless, in a pure REST stateless architecture at the backend level. Now we gain also the possibility to deploy solution on different OS, not only to Microsoft OS, because we move, as I said, to ASP.NET Core. The result after this technology stack improvement was very impressive, because if we consider a typical page, a typical web application composed by a master page, a detail page, and then I go back in the master page, as you can see, we gained a lot of performance just changing the stack. So taking the same business logic, the same code at the backend level, we put a single page application. We reduce the bandwidth of the communication because we just exchange data and no HTML, and we reduce a lot the loading performance. I know that until now my presentation looks like an Apple presentation. For example, when you have a graph, you have data, we have logo, and maybe now I can say that actual Elfo framework is the fast framework ever produced by Elfo. Like the new iPhone is the fastest iPhone in the world. But now I want to go more in deep, because I think that until now my presentation was a little bit populist, but I want to give you some strategy, because it's hard to you say, okay, I want to change the technology stack in my company, but you didn't say nothing about it. You just say what you did in an obscure way. To be clear, I want to give you 3 suggestions that derive from our experience that we had in the last 2-3 years. First suggestion: when you want to change your technology stack, don't forget your actual knowledge. So don't forget your roots. You are doing a completely change of your stack. So be careful. Don't erase everything. Understand what can be kept in your actual knowledge. For example, at the backend level, we are Microsoft Gold partner. We want to keep the project business logic written in C#. We are speaking about a project of 20 years ago with a lot of logic already written. Do you want to migrate everything? I think that it's not reasonable moving in Python, for example, from the backend level in our condition. And also, we are Microsoft SQL Server expert. So I think that the much more reasonable solution for us is move to .NET Core and ASP.NET Core. I'm speaking about the backend level. At the UI level, instead, we have at least 10 years of the experience in developing HTML and CSS. Our graphics actually create mockup in HTML and CSS. We are already using MVVM pattern in a lot of UI, not only web, also client with WPF or Xamarin for the application in the mobile device. So I think that in this condition, the solution for us is migrate to Vue. Someone of you can raise the hand and say, Vue, but you have a lot of other possibilities. For example, you have React or you have Angular, which is the top one. So when we start, we know that we have to make a choice on the correct framework, and the possibility were, and also now are Angular, Vue, and React. The problem is that with Angular is not much more in the top level of the trending framework, and you can see clearly here. If you look at this project, if you look at this site, which is RiseStar.js, it's a site that collects all the much more best quoted framework in the world using the star of GitHub. Vue is the much more voted project since 4 years ago, since the beginning, 2006, 16, 17, 18, 19, Vue was on top. Also from the most popular project overall, but also for the front-end framework. And if you see in the Vue ecosystem, for example, Vuetify, the framework of the UI, is in third position this year, so compliment to John. And looking at this representation of the reality of the framework, Angular is it's in the fourth position. It was it is Svelte now is in third position, and this is one aspect, the popularity of the project. Because for a software house, choosing a framework is something very important. I don't want to choose a small framework. I want to choose a framework that is used, and there is a community under it that maintain it, and a framework that is growing. Okay. Second aspect, don't forget your knowledge, and using this aspect, React is out of scope, because you know that React doesn't have the part of HTML and CSS. React use its own UI to create the page based on JSX. So due to this fact, React and Angular was not considered during the migration, and this is why we choose Vue. And this is why we choose Vue. Okay. Now the second suggestion. The first was don't forget your actual knowledge. The second suggestion is don't reinvent the wheel. In my career, I'm working in Alpha since 15 years ago. I see, and also during my developing career, I try to redevelop something that is already present in the world. In the world, I mean in the IT technology field. For example, the world is full of libraries that are doing something. I saw with my eyes someone during at the beginning of the 2000, at the end of the first decade of 2000, try to develop its own an ORM, an object relationship mapping. But why? We have an hibernate, we have entity framework that are very mature ORM. Why you have to re-implement one ORM yourself? For this reason, when we migrate our stack, we say, okay, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And from the backend point of view, we took in Hibernate, we took Dapper, Serilog for the logging, and Service Bus that help us for the microservice architecture, Mini Profiler that help us to profiling our request. But the same on the UI level. On the UI level, we don't want to, for example, one of the biggest problems that we have is to globalize an application. I mean, gives to the user the translation on its own language, and I mean, for the strings point of view, but also from the date and the number point of view. Why do we have to develop something that is already present to the world? For this reason, we are using E11N for the localization, Mobile.js for the date, Autonumeric.js for the number globalization, or for managing the routing inside the Vue application. We are using Vue Router. We are using Actions for managing the HTTP request, and a lot of other library we are using. And I suggest you to have a look on Awesome Vue, which is a project, a GitHub project that is composed by just one Markdown page that contains all the cases that are surrounding the Vue world. Example, company that are using Vue, a lot of strategy to use it. I suggest you to have a look on it. I think that the suggestion that I gave you, which is don't reinvent the wheel, is the most comprehensible, because a lot of you know the problem and know that possible as to not redevelop something that is already present. But I think that it's the one that can introduce some pain. First of all, relying a lot to third-party solution can introduce you some vulnerability problem, and this is very critical when you're working with multinational organization. I mean, big organization that they want to be sure that the code used does not contain any vulnerability. As a matter of fact, this is an open point. This is an open problem, and you have to do, if you choose to rely on third-party library, you have to do something in your. You can't just use it. You have to put some control on the library that you are using it. And there are a lot of tools, there are a lot of cases to put in place. For example, when you deploy your software, have a check on the latest vulnerability that your code can have, your code in terms of third-party references. Also npm has the command npm audit to check if there is some vulnerability inside this inside the library that you are using. The other problem that my suggestion about don't reinvent the wheel is that is a bastard problem, which is the so-called third-party semver problem. You know better than me probably what is semver. It's a semantic versioning when you release your library and you put a version on it. This version is not just a number, but just reading it, you can understand what is the effect that an update of this library can have in your code base. Because if the number change is the first, you will have a breaking change. If it is the second, you will have a new feature. If the number changed is the latest one, you have just a bug. So in our idea, if until this position, if you change the number, no problem, you can update, because no breaking change were put in place during the update. What is the problem? The problem is that the versioning is chosen not by us, but by the developer that produced the software. So it's a pure trust operation. So we say, okay, you increase the second number, the new feature number, so I update, I trust you. 5 days ago, the developer of Vue 11n, 5 days ago, starting now, released the 8.17.0 version that introduced a new feature about the fallback locale. Okay. And for this reason, it's a new feature, so increase the second number. The problem is that it was not just a new feature, because introduce the possibility to have a new typing for this fallback locale. You say, no, the fallback locale can be string, but also Boolean. Okay, and it released these things as a new feature, not a breaking change feature. But this, in terms of TypeScript at a compile time, is a breaking change. And in our project, we references Vue 11n as with this charter. That means automatical update when you build this library in the latest version of the update to the latest version of this library until the new feature. Of course, doesn't update is don't automatically update if the major number increase, because you can have a breaking change. Automatic update if the new feature or the bug number change. In this case, he changed the new feature number, and automatically all of our software during the build operation crash during the build. So you have to put attention on this aspect. You are trusting external people, okay, the community, okay, okay, the fact that E11n is used by all over the world, but you are trusting human, and human can make errors. I don't have a solution to this problem. I want just to highlight the fact that you have to be careful on this suggestion. Latest suggestion that I can put in place is no wrapper. What does it mean, no wrapper? This is creating wrapper was the trend from 2000 and 2010 in the IT world. And you can see, you can take a repository of this period of time between 2000 and 2010, and see that a lot of developers produce code like this. As a matter of fact, between 2000 and 2010, a lot of CMS were released, Joomla, WordPress, where there is a black box control, in this case called modification control. You pass a file, which are these package name and view name. You pass a file where there is an XML recipe to that explain how this modification control can be generated, and automatically it generates a page. Okay, probably there will be some possibility of customization, but in this case you are hiding everything. You are creating a wrapper, which is a black box. So please create this modification control, which is a page. 10 minutes, okay, which is a page, and automatically you create this fact. Okay, it can reduce maybe the time of developing in this moment, but it had a lot of pain, okay, in the long term, because imagine how many customization you have to put in a customer wants, and how many things you have to change the modification control to respect all the customer needs. And when you change a modification control for React to customer needs, you break the things for the needs that another customer had in the past. So what about, instead of creating this modification control that is something that automates the work. What about creating instead a template? So I put, I don't want to create a modification control. I use what the IT literature said to me. So in this case, we are using in this image, Vuetify 1, because there are still VFlex inside. Instead of having a sort of black box that create me a form in HTML, I create a form in HTML using, in this case, Vuetify or the framework of UI that I chosen. Okay, it will be much more expensive in terms of line of code. Okay, yes, but if you want to change something, you have the code. It's here. You don't have to wait someone that release a new version of modification control that can answer to your specific needs. Change it. The code is here. And this is a lesson that we have learned in the latest 20 years of development, I think. The other, inside the suggestion of the suggestion of no wrapper, I want to suggest you also another thing, which is Vuetify. And it's not because we have John here, but it's because we analyze a lot of UI library. When we decide to migrate to Vue, we analyze a lot of UI library, and we decide to use Vuetify at least for one reason, because it gives you the possibility to easily extend their control. And I have a demo of this. I don't know if Riccardo, I can do this demo, or I have to put my demo in queue with the one of John.
I think you can finish with the slides, and then we can.
I'm ending with the demo.
With the demo, okay. So yes. I think it's the time.
Okay, so I can take my demo and then I leave the okay. I leave to John. My demo. Sorry. Okay. In this demo, I try to put in code all the suggestions that I gave you during my presentation. Don't reinvent the wheel and no wrap. This is a simple Hello World project created with the famous Vue create command and then Vue add Vuetify. So I create a startup project where one moment, please, because I forgot to serve the project before starting. My fault. If you have any question, you can, I don't know, raise an hand, raise me a question. Okay, start. Okay, this is a simple, a very simple page where I have a v-text field control, which is an input, an HTML input decorated by Vuetify and included in its own framework, where you have and with it you have a lot of possibility. For example, if you look at the documentation with a Vuetext field, you can do a lot of things. You will have a lot of automatic style. All the style are related to the material, the material UX, of course. But looking inside it, you don't have nothing that can be associated to control a number inside this text box. Okay, but this can be a problem because this can be a problem because I have to produce a software that can reach a lot of customers in different time zones with different culture. So I have a problem of globalization, and I want that moving from English to Italian culture, the decimal separator should be changed. And I don't want that inserting letter, the insertion of letter can be accepted inside my V text numeric field control, but this V text numeric field control is not present in Vuetify. So if I had this problem with other kind of library, I don't know, we treat Telerik Telerik suites, we analyze Syncfusion suites, we analyze Quasar at the beginning, the Quasar framework at the beginning, and probably now they have a control like this. But if we encountered this kind of wall in the past, okay, we abandoned the framework because I don't want to create a wrapper as the suggestion that I gave you before. I don't want to create a wrapper inside the text field to manage, maybe putting inside some jQuery to manage the fact that on input change I have to validate the content of the text box, so substitute the dot with the comma if we are in culture. No, we don't want to create a wrapper. If you choose a framework, we want to try to use a framework at least to extend the framework, not to hide the content of the framework. And with Vuetify, we can do these kind of things because, as you can see, one of the best things I think of Vuetify is that, okay, this is the number page that I showed you before, and here we have the vtext field that is in binding of the model with the number. Number is a number in JavaScript. Okay, of course, vtext field doesn't manage number, and so here you can write whatever you want. Okay, but what about creating our custom v numeric text field? Say, okay, I have a v numeric text field that extend vtext field, and it's an extension, and I leave all the possibility that vtext field give us, so all the stylish approach of material design, blah blah blah. But I want just to change the behavior of what happened under the hood when the control is mounted and when the user put an input on it. Okay, in the much more natural way. And following the suggestion, don't reinvent the wheel, we want to use AutoNumeric, which is a framework that helps you to manage the globalization of the number that appears. So what we said is, okay, implement extend vtext field, and every time that the user enter an input, don't display the input as text, but as pure text, but display what AutoNumeric say to display, considering the culture that you pass to it. As a matter of fact, sorry, I had to copy and paste the solution in okay. Now here I can do this. I just import my control numeric text field. I have, of course, to import it from the folder extension where I define it. And then I have to declare it as a component of my script. Okay. And bam, I have exactly a vtext field like control, because it's a vtext field at the end. So exactly, it looks like all the other control that I have in my application. And it manages the culture without any problem. I can't insert any letter, And for example, now I'm in NUS, so the decimal separator is the dot. The command is is used for this kind of separator, and changing from NUS to IT, the modification of the culture reflect the Vutex field, and I don't have to put any wrapper in place, any custom code that react to the change of the user in terms of event. I simply say, starting from Vutex field, extend the property, and you have the documentation, or at least the base code of Vuetify, and just with some hit of overriding, because it's like overriding a class in C#, guys. We simply say on input, and when you have to generate the input, these are methods that are present inside the Vuetify code base. Simply use autonumeric to understand the value to display, and that's it. As a matter of fact, you will also have exactly the same possibility, the same prop of a Vutex field. And this gives you a lot of power, because from the don't reinvent the wheel and not create wrapper suggestion, you are 100% aligned. So I think that my speech is over. Until, of course, the next front end, the next JavaScript framework that will born probably during this half an hour. New JavaScript new JavaScript framework is born. So maybe in 1 month we'll take another session like this, speaking about another framework. And thanks. If you have any question.
Thank you, Carlo. Good.
Okay. So we
John,
can switch.
yeah. Meanwhile, John can prepare his demo. There are questions.
Yeah, my demo, I'm ready whenever.
Okay, so I think you can start, and then we can keep at the end all the questions. Thank you.
It's like it moved. I don't know if I have the option to. Yeah, I need to get presenter from Carlo.
Yes, you have to give the presenter role to John, guys.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay.
Can you try, Andrea? Because I have an ugly bug in my opinion on the UI, and it is.
There we go.
Okay, John,
you.
now you are.
I've made it.
All right, now this is an ultra wide, so I don't know if it looks bad. I can do it per window, but can you see everything okay here? I can zoom in a little bit.
So is a little bit better now? Yeah.
Okay. If it's not all good, I can here. Let me just change it to 1.
I'm seeing above your monitor, above your window.
Oh, that's why. Okay. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yes, now I see just the console.
Better.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll just demonstrate this really quick, and I'm gonna hit enter while this is while I'm talking. So this is the preset that I was talking about before, and essentially what this does is whenever you finish your regular Vue installation, it'll ask you, hey, would you like to save this as a preset? And whenever you hit yes, all this does is create an entry in a .vue.rc file in your the home directory of your computer. Well, the remote presets use the same logic in regards to it is a JSON file, or basically a JSON structure that represents all of the features and functionalities that the CLI should automatically install as it instantiates. So what I wanted to do was provide, and I'm still trying to get it even smaller, but I wanted to provide one line that the user could put in that would allow them to pre-scaffold an application ready to go. And that is just needing to create a new view application and assigning a preset. So right here is our first set of options. And again, the preset is a Vue CLI plugin at its default that provides you with a set of options to determine, if you want the base, essential, or recommended package. And I'll obviously add the ability to do custom as well. But right now, all we have is the base, and we'll go ahead and select this. And this is going to provide a few options or a few folders or features that are different from the regular Vue installation. For the most part, everything is exactly the same. We've only added two things. The first thing being layouts, because I liked the layout system from Nuxt, and I thought that for me at least, it's very common to have an application with a back end and a front end that obviously have different layouts, and I wanted to make that process easy, and it is very simple. And then the concept of base or app components, which is something in the Vue style guide that talks about having these plain or dumb components that are used globally throughout your application and reused, so you have a default or baseline implementation to be able to expand off of, and I'll quickly show you that. So whenever the application finishes installing, you'll get some information here saying that you installed the preset. Let me go ahead and open that folder that I just created. If it's in here, sites. No. All right, here's what we'll do then. I'll say code KLab. And I'll open a new window, and I'll have to change my focus real quick. All right. Okay. And you should be able to see the new window now. I should say KLab and have some folder structure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So I'll quickly go over the structure, but it's the same thing you're normally used to with a regular Vue application. You'll have a router file. If we had the Vuexstore installed, you'd have the same Vuexstore file. Views, which is a common, which is used by Vue for determining, which view to show within the router. This is the same thing. Plugins, which again, this is already default with how we bootstrap Vuetify anyways. And in the future, we're gonna move to using the Vue config, I think, but potentially with version 3. But for now, we already create a plugins folder for Vuetify, so we reutilize that to hook up things like the web font loader, which is going to improve your SEO and performance and user experience for users just automatically. It's something I always use. It's a great thing to have when you're building applications. The base components bootstrap, and this again exists within the Vue style guide. And this is just abstracted from it. And all this does in a nutshell is look inside of the components, and in this instance, base folder, and take every single component that's there and automatically bootstrap it to the Vue instance. Now, in the future, I will say that I'm renaming this from base to app, because I like most people that I've dealt with that I've showed this on a personal level have said, the base is kind of weird, and the style guide also says you can use app, so that's what we'll use. But all it is, again, just a quick baseline V button that has a default setup that you can expand off of, that you can, have a base card or have a base card that uses the base button, and et cetera, so on and so forth. We're creating kind of we're utilizing practices and procedures that are already defined by Vue and in their style guide, but just kind of implementing a couple of them inside of the project that helps make it easier to streamline when you're doing development. The layouts that I've talked about before, this is, again, if you've ever looked at the Vuetify documentation, I like to have a main index file for Vue components, and this is where I kind of bootstrap the various features. It makes it easier to work and reason through the code, and something that I've been doing for a lot of years that I think is a good practice. And if we decide to change it, we will. But for now, it's a easy way to create essentially small Vue applications. And what I mean by that is, we have a base layout, which is your default. And while I'm talking, I'm going to start up the dev server so I can show you what this looks like on the other screen. But this is exactly what you would normally do in an application. You'd have an app bar with some information. You might have a main view, which has your content for Vuetify, your main router view, and that's it. And then a main index point to import, utilize both of those components. And what you end up with, let's see here. Did it focus on my new screen? Oh, it says screen is not paused. Okay.
Not yet for now.
So yeah, I'll change it over in a second. The software was doing some screen stuff. I couldn't tell what it was doing. Okay. But then yeah, everything else is essentially the same. You've got your regular router component. The only thing that we do is instead of having just base routes, we utilize the nested route functionality of View Router to say, hey, we want to have this base layout and then this component inside of it. And what that ends up translating to you or to the user is, again, so we've got this main home file, which is our view, and we take our layout. We have our main view, which pulls in, this is the router view output, and then we just reference the views. Common stuff that you see with the regular view setup, but just completely configured already for you. And the last couple things I'll touch on. So we have a ESLint config and an ESLint plugin. The current plugin is mainly focused on upgrades, which will modify that or expand that in the future, whereas the config is an opinionated set of variables based upon ESLint standard and the View ESLint plugin with ESLint config plugin, whatever it is, for their recommended feature set, with just some modifications, because doing development, if you've ever worked with their ESLint plugin and having your screen go black whenever you have a variable defined that's not used is extremely annoying during development. So I tried to put in feature requests to get it changed, but they said no. So now we have the Vuetify config, and it's again opinionated to help. If you've ever worked inside of a view file and had
rispondo alle domande.
Say that again?
Lui e io, cioè alla fine c'è la
Carlo, sorry,
you are not on mute. Okay.
Okay. So like you can see on the screen right here, when you have these errors, and being able to basically save and have it automatically fixed, and in a format that we have used for years and that we believe is a good process. Again, so you don't have to think about is this the best way to do that? What should I name this? Where should this go? Trying to solve some of those questions beforehand. And then what that ends up turning into, and I'll change my screen over to this other. Okay. Move this window away from the shared application. Okay. So I thank you everyone for your patience. This is a new software and it's having issues finding the Chrome window. Let me see if I can just do both the whole screen.
Oh yeah.
Make this maximum. Can you see this?
Yeah. The browser?
Okay. Yeah. So, and I'm still tweaking on this. And again, this is all in development. Been pushed back slightly due to the current situation in the world, but still being worked on. But just like you would open up your brand new Vue application and have a boilerplate kind of information introduction, and Vuetify takes that normally and adapts it and adds a little bit onto it. This is the presets where you'll come up in the screen to let you know all the features that it has available. We'll have some links and you're ready to develop. So you type in one line, you create a new application, assign a Vuetify preset, and in less than a minute to 2 minutes, depending upon your internet and computer speed, you've got an application that's already scaffolded, ready to develop. And with the future improvements that we're adding, you'll not only have an application ready to develop, but it'll automate things that you want to do, like create unit tests and be able to create a storybook, do it for you automatically, while you're able to develop as you normally were, but with some additional features and functionality to make it easier. So you can check it out. It's part of our Vue CLI plugin set. So you can find it in our main repository. It's called Vue CLI plugins. And we have quite a few in here. A lot of them are theme presets that are specifically, and you'll see this, it says Vuetify preset. These are specifically for your actual theme, whereas we have additional ones such as our CLI plugin, and in particularly what I was just working on a little bit ago was the base plugin, which is, or the preset, base preset, which again, all this is just some predefined structure that utilizes what's already there in Vue and just augments it a little bit. So that was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think we can proceed with the questions maybe. And
yeah, there is a request from Sudhakar that is asking if you can share the demo code.
yeah.
And there is a question from...
A question for John or for me? For both?
Probably for both.
Both.
And I have, there is a question from Andrea. Andrea?
Hi. Question from Carlo. Ciao ragazzi.
Yes.
Which is the strategy have you adopted to migrate your project to the new Vuetify, stack Vuetify? You have started with only with the new solution, or you have a coexist technology? An example, a solution with a web form and web form site, and a Vuetify and a Netcore site.
Okay, and a nice question, because there is no one answer. There is a lot of answer. I know that it's a bad answer, but the answer is it depends. It depends on what you have to do. The strategy is, for sure, new project we start with the new technology, and for the new project it's easy. For the old project, you can have a different way of migrating, or if you have the budget that give you the possibility to. Can you hear me and can you see me? Maybe I can share my webcam.
Yeah,
it's better.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem, so sorry, but I forgot to do the webcam, and before the microphone was switched on, so sorry for the listener. It happens. As I said, when in the specific question, I have a web form project that has to be alive, and we have a new portion of the software that must be created with the new technological stack. Okay, the idea is, during our migration, as you remember before, when I speak about don't forget your knowledge, the mantra was redo the UI, because as you can understand, the UI was the much more difficult part, the much more heavy update that we take. But in parallels from the UI, we have rebuild the UI from the scratch. From the backend point of view, the mantra was don't touch backend, touch the backend as less as possible, because our backend before was web form, so C# code referenced inside the code behind of a web form. So the idea was, okay, we migrate everything to Netcore. We try to remove the business logic from the code behind, and from the code behind of the window, and the same business logic now will be now is the is the code called by our REST API, and it's okay. From this will put you some costs, but more or less you can achieve this goal. Then you have another problem. The other problem is the authentication management, because you know, if you are using Andrea, you are using web form, I suppose.
Yeah, web form and
okay.
and network and MVC.
Okay. One of the biggest problems that you can encounter in your journey is the authentication, because you are passing from a stateful stack to a stateless stack. In the MVC web form, you have the state of the user that is passed among server and client. In Aspect Core, no, everything is stateless. So in this condition, you will have some trouble, and there are a lot of possibility. The simple possibility is, okay, I will take my old project in web form as a shell, and with a frame, I will host the new part built with the new technology. And it's not. I don't have an answer, the precise answer to this issue about authentication and how display UI old and new in the same web application. There are a lot of strategy. What we developed was, or you create two different apps, and through the redirect, you pass from an app to another, passing the information of the authentication through a JWT token, or was using an iframe. I don't know why someone assigned me the role of relator. But
just because in
you
this
have
way,
you have to evaluate. I think that you have to evaluate what you are migrating.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, there is another question from Stas, and I think we can enable the mic. So
yeah. Hey, Stas.
Ciao, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Ciao, Stas.
Good. First of all, I wanted to say thank you very much for Carlo, for John, and for the whole KLab community that made this webinar to be possible, especially after the problems and the crisis because of the corona. And I'm very glad to finally see you here. Even on my screen, it's enough. And I hope that you can give me the possibility to be a little bit selfish, because I have one question for John and one question for Carlo. And
yes.
I can start probably with our guest, John. I wanted to ask you one important thing that I was asking myself all the time during working with Vuetify library, with Vuetify framework. I was present in the part of the story of Carlo when we needed to choose the Vue framework as a base for our components. And it was 1.5 years ago when the Vuetify was just in the first version. And for me, pretty much, Vuetify was plus minus in the same level comparing with the other top 3 framework of Vue components. And Vuetify had the killing feature that no one from those frameworks didn't have, the grouping inside the table, simple grouping inside the table. After that, I saw how Vuetify framework was developing and was that had some big evolution since the first version. Now you have a lot of things, you have a big community, a lot of things that other libraries, even rich libraries that have a lot of code base doesn't have, support, CSS things. I can count a lot of times. But for me, still one of the biggest worries to start working with Vuetify is the big need to use material design from the first place. And I just wanted to ask you, do you think to going deeper inside the development of the component library and maybe in some future be less coupled with material design? Because now you have a lot of CSS variables, we can override a lot of things already, and if we are patient enough, we can even change almost everything from material design that is in Vuetify. But we need to do it anyway from the start. So it's not like we have a theme or like some tool set that makes Vuetify works in material design way. We have material design as a base, and we need to override a lot to work with it. And for us, Alpha, that our apps are data-driven apps with a lot of tables and forms, and sometimes the material design contents like that says to create a big layout, big components inside the page that could be accessible also from mobile, sometimes is not so how can I say, the core need. But Vuetify still, for me, is the best framework that provides so much features that we still will use it for sure. So is the question, do you want to follow the material design forever during the development?
No.
Thank you.
And no is the short answer. The longer answer is, and I don't know how to actually, can I post things into the thing to everyone?
Give the role of presenter to John, please.
Yep.
Okay. So presets are the okay, yeah, show my screen. It's not going to let me select the window, so I have to do the whole thing. Okay. So this was a new feature in version 2.3, and what it does is it takes existing features that we already had, the ability to customize the framework, and creates a defined process for it, including a process for creating shareable ones. And like I think the talk that I had for this one didn't include information regarding presets, but what they are in a nutshell is a collection of Vuetify settings to automatically bootstrap your application. So the first thing being, you've got the Vuetify preset, which is just a Vuetify object. Then when we come into the actual styling portion, this is where we discuss material studies. Material studies is if you come into the actual material design, oh, this is not the right one. I didn't mean to go to that one. I'll go to it. I'll get the correct link in a minute that I wanted to show you, but the material studies are, here it is. So the material studies themselves are taking the principles of the material design system, right, but showing you how you can change it. Now, I know your question was in regards to, are we always going to be material design? Well, the short answer, like I said before, is no. What the goal is with the introduction of these presets is to provide the foundation for us to eventually, and the date that I'm throwing around is version 4, but because it'll be a major undertaking, but the goal is to move the material design styling as in or out as a theme preset essentially. So if somebody wanted to take the Vuetify components and make a bootstrap, theme or whatever the case may be, they could do that. With that being said, the process to be able to customize it to that extent does exist right now. And I can tell you, I have worked on hundreds of applications, and I don't think there's any one of them where I've needed more than 100 lines of CSS code for the entire thing. There's variable configuration, and then actual Vuetify object or the instantiation options available as well. So yes, there are ways to, one, make it easier to modify it now. There is extensive guides on it, and we have ones are available so that you can download them and check them out. And in the future, the goal is to remove the explicit coupling. Obviously, material will always be our default. That will probably never change. But the movement towards agnostic components, I guess white label-esque components we're moving towards. I don't know what that'll look like because obviously there are some aspects that exist within the components and their design that are specific to material. Not very many, but there are some. and those will be the challenges when we get to them. But otherwise, yeah, I want to remove the need for it entirely, and it can just be an option that users opt into. But yep, I hope that answers. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes.
I think, sorry, Stas, I want just to add a little aspect on the question of Stas, because we worked together in the migration phase. I think that this is I think that I want to say to John that the much more biggest requests for our customer in that fight with the coupling between Vuetify and material design was I know that can be stupid, but it was the height of the text field. The possibility now you are following the material design, no? So you are using the height of 56 pixel for the standard text field, and after the introduction of dense mode, the dense mode say that with dense you can have the height of 36, 34 pixel, I don't remember.
It's 40.
Yes, 34 pixel. And okay, for me it's okay. The problem is that a lot of customers say, no, I want the 8 to 20 pixel, but I can't just simply with a CSS say 20 pixel because you have a lot of transition and animation on text field. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So
what I feel in the usage of Vuetify is this little kind of thing that for a customer it sounds like a big thing, but I know that it's stupid, but you know what I mean.
Well, it's not stupid. It's just it's a request, and I'm going to put a link in here that you can take a look at and you can propagate down. And like I always say, there's room for improvement, but we have, if you go down to the API section of that link and click on SAS. I don't know exactly how many are here. We should probably have a count, but it looks like about 15 to 20 off the bat variables that anything that we allow you to change. So you were mentioning like, oh, well, you have the dense size and there's things that are compensated for that. And if there are areas that do compensate for those changes that don't exist in the variables, obviously point those out and we'll get it updated. But anything that we provide in the variables, it's assumed that, at least to a reasonable degree, that you can make modifications, and we're going to use those modifications in the calculations for the other stuff. Now, I know that for dense, there are there's at least one that has kind of a specific modification that's for dense, but all of those things that you want to do are actually doable. It may just be that we're not doing a really good job of showing you that. I know that the Vuetify docs are often polarized. Like I get people that say they love it, and I get people that say that they hate it. So you know, it works for some people, it doesn't work for others. And I'm trying to come up with a better way to show this information to everyone. And one of those things that we're actually doing is for version 3, we're consolidating our Boolean props, and we're making a small shift towards if there's a situation, and I don't know if we have an explicit definition, maybe it's 3, but if we have a certain amount of, and when I say Boolean props, I refer to if you have a true and false statement, I'm referring to props that only turn things like they have a true value. They're either there or they're not. The difficulty with being able to have all those Boolean props is, for example, if you've used a button, you've got small or extra small, small, large, and extra large. Well, that's really good, but those are, you know, 5 props or 4 props, whatever the case may be. And when we only had, you know, when we had smaller APIs, they worked out great. The difficulty, though, is as the API expands, we end up with, I guess, a little bit of code bloat. So in the next version, so in Material Design 2, they have a defined system for sizing. It's default, comfortable, and compact, which is what we're going to be moving towards. And as opposed to having those as Boolean props, they'll be, as of right now, string-based. So you would say, you know, size or whatever the variable or the prop we designate, you know, size equals comfortable or whatever the case may be. And the idea is all of those you know, features that we're able to plug into one prop reduces the API scope and makes it easier to find things. But even with that being said, looking at our API, you know, objectively, it's kind of hard to move through. And I'm trying to work on something to make that better. We did add the SAS variables to the API of everything. And then we also, on our main, under customization, on our main SAS variables page, we have a very extensive guide that explains not only how to use it, but some of the, we have a variable API explorer where you can explore all of the variables that exist within the framework and, you know, try to find something that is applicable to what you're needing to use. And I think that if we can get it to, if we can get more people to be able to see the documentation and also get feedback from people that are using it saying, hey, you know, this is good, but we're missing this or that, then I think that we'll be able to alleviate some of the issues where people think that, well, I can't really customize it or the process isn't very clear, or at least it doesn't make sense to me. How can we make it better? So that's definitely feedback after you go through these pages that I've showed you. If they don't answer your question, you know, I definitely left some feedback on you know, what people feel that they're missing out on to be able to understand how to utilize them, and we'll make the improvements.
Yes. I think that our warning, something that we feel, okay, during our development is much more related to some months ago when you didn't have yet variable put in place or were in a preliminary stage. Okay, we noticed that with the introduction of variable presets, a lot of things are changing, especially taking consideration that we start our technology stack change with Vuetify 1. So a lot of things that now we have weren't present at the beginning. So a lot of pain was due also to the fact that some projects are still using Vuetify 1 instead of Vuetify 2. So we are speaking about SAS variables. SAS variables were introduced 3-4 months ago and are huge, are okay, are great. But yes, I understand.
Yeah, and honestly, the biggest thing is they've actually always been there. The process hasn't been well defined. And in some regards, that was, we had processes for the individual sections, right? Here's how to customize the Vuetify object, and here's how to customize the SAS variables. But we didn't necessarily have a cohesive process, which is, again, sometimes I take a little longer on defining those processes because I hate to, once we make a decision, it's kind of hard to roll it back. And you kind of gave me an idea. Maybe I should have a, a returning to Vuetify thing, or maybe improve the migration section with, some more information regarding tips and tricks on upgrading, or things that, hey, you're upgrading to 2. Here's a complete example list, or, because we have them, but it doesn't necessarily always mean it's getting in front of the user. So that could probably be a FAQ item or something. So I'll add something in regards to better explaining to users that, especially are coming from version 1, that there are a lot more options available.
Yes, also as in our documentation, we have something like this that are much focused not on the developer mind, but something that is much more high level. Instead of having the guide of the API to set the variable, we have the concept of case. Okay, having the text box that is height 5 pixels. And there is all the configuration to, instead of putting the attention on the API, we put the attention of the case of what you want to do. I know that it's hard, you have a lot of cases, but
I mean,
the
best solution right now beyond SAS variables, if it would be a process change, and that is in regards to how you develop your components, where if you have, so not all of the styling changes that you might make for a button or another component exist necessarily within the variables. It might exist within an option or something like that. The best example would be the base component that I had in the preset that redefined defined a color property of primary, so we had a kind of a default. So what I at least end up doing right now, and you know, the goal is to eventually have everything abstracted to where you could literally have just a big, you know, JSON object or whatever that would be, the styles declaration of your Vuetify application. But as of, you know, as of right now, the process, the best way to do it is for whatever you can change in styles, do. So whatever you need to change on the default of the component. So let's say that all your text fields are outlined. Well, you don't want to define outline on every text field. You want to create a base text field component that has outline defined or contains the ability to specify between states that you may use within your application. And then everything is done in one spot. So you may end up where you have to do what I call as an override, where just some things aren't controlled in Sass and just have to be explicitly overridden by regular CSS. That's, as my son would say, that's just life. But at least when you do that, it's scoped at one spot, and then you can make the modifications. So I will say that right now, because you were mentioning changing some of the height, I know the big thing on material design is it just feels very blobby, very blocky, very large. And obviously we were able to shore up some of that with our dense fields. But one thing that has happened, and I'll post this to you, you can take a look, is one thing Material Design or Google started doing is putting some of their design progress and how they're developing material design spec as a whole, where they're showing kind of introductory implementations. And one of those implementations was the introduction of dense spec for material design in general. And what that means is that before there was really only specification in regards to inputs, and I'll post a link here, but now there is the more definition, and again, you'll see at the top it says beta, so this is the new thing they're doing to try to show features faster. But you can actually, the first thing you see is the data table. Now we already offer dense, but the thing is that whenever there's something that is in Vuetify that's not in the spec, we have to take the spec and do our best to derive what we might think that would be based on either other components or existing principles. You know, everything's at a 4px or interval or 0.25 rem. But now with the actual definition, we're able to, and they need to still add a lot more. But if you scroll down to the component section, they have an interactive demo that allows you to see. And this is actually what we will be moving to in version 3. You know, we're not going to have the extra small, and extra large stuff. While those are very good and it's very, very helpful, it would be better for us to, you know, reduce the complexity of defining settings like that. But then the user that needs more advanced stuff having either, you know, tutorials on how to do it, or it's baked in somehow. To be able to modify it. So it's always, here's the baseline, here's how to modify it, you know, do whatever you want. But hopefully with version 3, that's gonna improve it. And like I said, if you run into something where it's like, hey, I'm trying to modify this variable for an input and it's messing up the way the label sits or the way, you know, something is designed because there may be a proprietary style that's modifying it, you know, bring that to attention and we can take a look at it. But for the most part, everything should work as normal when you adjust variables, and at least that's the way we develop it. And if we make a mistake, we'll fix it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, we are a little bit in extra time. So I think it's the time to close. I really would like to say thanks to both John and Carlo for their time and for their sharing.
You're welcome. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry that I didn't get to come there live, but this was actually quite a bit of fun. So
Yeah, but something we cannot control. Okay,
Exactly.
so we
Next
will
time.
try to share the recording once ready, and stay tuned on our channel so that you can be updated. Currently, we have a lot of contents in Italian, but we will see in the future if we can continue with this kind of events. And thank you again, and stay safe, guys. Okay?
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao, guys. Ciao. Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao a tutti. Ciao, ciao.